Welcome to the new episode of the show. My name is Erika Paul and I will be the host today. I'm excited to introduce you our new guest, Dr. Ellen McCarthy.
My experience suggests that most people, they've tried different ways of losing weight or changing how they eat, and they repeatedly come back to the same point, which is, I tried that and it worked for a while, but I couldn't stick to it. And as a psychologist, that is not surprising at all, because most of the diets invite people to change how they eat really radically overnight.
Dr. Ellen McCarthy, she is an expert in providing cognitive behavioral therapy and integrates Main Street approach with cutting-edge techniques. She has been featured in The Sun, Women's Health, and Marie Claire. The main topic of the episode today is losing weight, but with a very different approach. So, lose weight forever, eating all your favorite foods. Yes, it's possible. Dr. Ellen McCarthy will give us the tools and the understanding during the episode. But before we dive into the interview, I wanted to remind you that this episode is brought by 33 Fuel Natural Sport Nutrition. So if you are searching a different kind of sport nutrition where the ingredients are actually real food, go to 33fuel.com. Now it's time to introduce you our new guest, Dr. Ellen McCarthy, the Appetite Doctor. Welcome, Ellen. Thanks
Thank you.
so much to join me to the show. We will cover lots of fascinating topics with you. But
Great.
Before we start, Ellen, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Sure. Hi. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've worked as a clinical psychologist for 30 years now, and I've worked in adult mental health during that time. So I've worked with people who've been suffering with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and psychological trauma. And I trained originally in experimental psychology and then in clinical, and clinical psychology is like a branch of psychological experimental psychology where you apply psychological research and psychological understanding to clinical situations. So it's basically an applied it's a version of applied psychology. And I became interested in this whole amazing area of eating, the psychology of eating and appetite, just because of a chance remark by a patient a few years ago, back in 2011. And I started to get really interested in what was essentially just helping people to lose a moderate amount of weight. So although I've worked with people with eating disorders, this isn't about eating disorders. This is about people who are unhappy with what they weigh, or people who are unhappy with aspects of how they eat. And I've just got extremely interested in it. And I've written a book about the approach that I developed, which is called Appetite. The approach is called Appetite Retraining. And it's basically all about the psychology of how to change how you eat. So that's my background has always been in psychology. Ever since I left school, I started studying psychology, and from then on, it's just been, that's what I've done ever since.
And I have to say, when we were chatting about doing this podcast, I was so interested to hear you talk about the part our thinking plays in how we eat. Could you tell a little bit more about this?
Sure. Well, it's interesting, I think, that most of what you see in the newspapers and on TV, when it comes to thinking about changing how you eat, the focus is almost always on the food. So there are loads and loads of articles. I mean, there are just about every day, certainly every week in the newspapers, there are big spreads about here's a new way to lose weight, here are some recipes, here's what you've been doing wrong, and here's a new way of eating. Clear your cupboards out, and tomorrow you can eat differently. And what really strikes me as a psychologist is that for the majority of people, certainly the majority of people I've come across, the trouble around eating and weight and so on isn't nutritional information that they lack. It's much more to do with how they eat and the psychology behind what stops them doing what they know they should be doing, in inverted commas. So most of us know, I mean, I'd be very surprised if your audience don't know what healthy food is or what healthy eating might look like in general terms. But my experience suggests that most people most people, certainly most people at work I come across, but most people just, friends, acquaintances, everybody seems to have things about how they eat that they're not really happy with. So when you take it, and most of them have done loads of diets. They've gone on countless diets. They've tried different ways of losing weight or changing how they eat, and they repeatedly come back to the same point, which is, I tried that and it worked for a while, but I couldn't stick to it. And as a psychologist, that is not surprising at all, because most of the diets invite people to change how they eat really radically overnight. And that's not how we're built. Psychologically speaking, our psychology evolved alongside our biology. So most people have heard of evolutionary biology, but actually even evolutionary psychology is the name given to the way that our brains and our minds have developed a lot over the course of evolution. So we're talking millions of years. And we have evolved. I mean, eating and appetite is so basic to our survival that all of our thinking and behavior patterns have evolved alongside that need to eat and stay healthy. And maybe the surprise thing for a lot of people is the role that thinking, thinking, different aspects of thinking, memory, perception, thinking patterns play in how we eat. So this is a bit of a long preamble to actually saying what it is about thinking.
It's very, very interesting, especially because you were saying looking backward, basically to our roots.
Yeah.
And our eating habit has changed so much from when we were men of the cave.
Yes,
you know.
Absolutely.
So how can we identify our current eating habits, and why is so hard to change?
I think that, as you said, identifying eating habits to me is perhaps the key. If you want to change how you eat, but you don't want to go on a diet because for you haven't found a diet that works, or you don't fancy a diet, then an alternative, a really genuine alternative, is to look at your current eating habits and notice which particular things you think are either making you unhappy with how you eat, or are leading you to be unable to lose weight if you want to lose weight, or for that matter, gain weight if you want to gain weight. So if you look very specifically at what it is that you're doing and just think about changing one of those things at a time. So it's important to underline this, that what we weigh and how whether we're gaining weight, losing weight, or maintaining weight, and how happy we are with eating, is about how we eat day in, day out. It's not to do with a single meal. It doesn't matter if you have a single overly large meal, right? Christmas dinner has no effect on the overall what you weigh during the year, if it's a one-off, or if it's like Christmas and birthdays and so on. Those occasional things do not influence our weight overall, but day in, day out habits do. The reason they're so hard to change is that over the course of evolution, it's a really smart system that's evolved so that the things that we do repeatedly, we don't need to allocate much brain space to. So anything that we do regularly, like the example I give in my book is brushing your teeth. Once upon a time, somebody taught you how to brush your teeth. And over the course of doing that a couple of times a day, repeatedly, something that needed to be thought about and concentrated on when you were a kid became automatic. And the way that's helpful, because it means that although you had to put all that effort in when you were tiny, now you'll be doing your teeth before you even realize you're doing your teeth, just because you've seen the toothpaste and it's a particular time of day and you're standing in front of the sink. And what habits do is they take a repeated, when we do something repeatedly, we form an action sequence memory trace. So a particular sequence of things. So with brushing your teeth, it's open the toothpaste, squeeze the toothpaste onto the toothbrush, brush your teeth, rinse. That's it. So that sequence of physical actions is stored in a way that doesn't need any thinking about at all. The only time you ever need to think about brushing your teeth is if you go to brush your teeth and it turns out the toothpaste is empty. Then you need to engage a bit of conscious thought about finding a new tube or something like that. So something interrupts it, you need to think about it. But the rest of the time, it's hugely helpfully relegated to automated sequences. But the great thing about that is we don't need to think about it. The problem is, because we don't need to think about it, if we want to change it, we've got to create some sort of glitch, or we've got to put some sort of conscious effort in.
So that's a fantastic, because it's really easy to understand how to brush your teeth. That is such a normal thing. We have in the habit and off we go. But if we want to give us some help to change our current eating habits, what we can apply, how we can do it, which are the tools?
Yeah, the tools. Particularly, let's take an example of, I don't know how much this applies to you. You can extend from this example, but a lot of people I see, because most people I see come for help with losing weight with this approach. And so perhaps the most common eating habit that they report that they think is adding to them holding on to weight they want to lose is their evening meal being bigger than they want it to be. No, bigger than they need it to be. So when you ask people about their general eating habits, when it comes to meals, they tend to say breakfast is fairly easy, or I don't have it, or I have a moderate amount of breakfast. Lunch, same. Evening meal, everything it's like going for broke. So a lot of people I see have actually quite a large evening meal. And if you want to change from day in, day out having that overly large evening meal to having a smaller meal, that is a habit change, right? That's a specific habit change. And what you need to do for that, in a nutshell, is to, it's extremely simple in principle, but there are psychological blocks to it. But the simplicity, the simple answer is that at the start of the meal, so you put the food on the plate, you remove from the plate a quarter of the food on it, or you don't serve it out in the first place. That's easier. That's better still. But you now have 3/4 of what you normally eat, and you then. So the first bit of effort is in doing the thing that's going to mean that the portion size is different. I mean, that's extremely obvious, simple thing to do. So then you eat the food, you eat the meal. At the end of that meal, if you've been having a meal that is bigger than that, it is very likely that at the end of the meal, you're not going to feel right. Something about it is going to feel you're a bit shortchanged, or you worry you're going to be hungry, or something is then going to kick in. So the other bit of thought is about what you do immediately at the end of the meal to move away from thinking about eating onto something else, because those surfacing sources of discomfort are only temporary. So if you can, day in, day out, reduce the size of your evening meal by a quarter, and just note it. I mean, I don't encourage people to think in terms of calories because we don't need to. It's completely unnecessary.
It's also very complex to figure out the calories of everything. You need to calculate every single ingredient you put inside.
Yeah, and it can be very unhelpful. It can be it can mean that people become over preoccupied with calorie counting, and it can mean that people feel under a constant sense of restriction.
Yeah.
Which what I encourage people to do is do the opposite of that, is to try and reduce restriction as much as possible. So yes, you're eating a quarter less for your dinner than you're used to, and you're going to do that every day until you get used to it. But once you get really used to it, after you've done it, the average amount of time to change a habit is 66 repetitions of something. So evening meal happening once a day, that's about after 2 months, it's likely that that is now a habit. So much a habit that you won't be thinking about taking a quarter off, because the 3/4 amount will now seem normal.
So that's really interesting what you're saying, and I understand completely how easy it is to basically make your meal smaller, and that is simple. But how you trick your mind after you eat that portion that is smaller? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, what you do is that, again, staying really simple where possible. The main thing to do at the end of that meal, because that won't feel normal, the main thing is probably, I suggest to people that they have a specific plan for what they're going to do at the end of what will, to begin with, will seem unusually small meal. It's just that thing of, because we're so used to something smaller, if it might feel wrong. And rats and other small mammals and pigeons, other species, have what they call, what behavioral scientists call a satiety sequence, a specific behavioral satiety sequence at the end of feeding. What they do is that when they stop feeding, so they'll be eating, whether it's a pigeon pecking at a seed, or whether it's a rat eating, they eat and eat and eat and eat, and then they stop. And as they stop, they switch to a different behavior. Grooming, in the case of they do, the rat grooms, the pigeon does something a little bit like grooming, and then sleeps. And what I think is really interesting about this is a really good model for us as humans, is to end a meal with a specific plan, predictable plan of what we're going to do next. It doesn't matter what you do. It could be anything. It doesn't need to be exercise. In fact, it might be a bad time to exercise, but it could be anything, as long as it's distracting and it's away from food. The reason this is so helpful is partly that it's just creating a new sequence, that now the 3/4 meal seems normal. But the other thing that's really helpful about it is that fullness signals in our gut take time to register in the brain. So after 20 minutes or so of distraction, we actually feel more satisfied or sated than we did when we stopped eating. So that helps too.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. So in my mind, I'm just thinking probably, okay, let's make the meal smaller.
Yeah.
And then maybe in my mind, I said, what can you do? What can you do? And in my mind, the first thinking was, I can wash the plate. So I know I can put back the food inside. It's kind of giving the idea, okay, it's done.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And anything like that signals the end. I mean, what some people find useful, and a research study showed and this is a really obvious thing, is that if you use menthol mouthwash to wash your mouth out at the end of a meal, that's a really good way of
Yeah,
ending that eating,
yeah,
because obviously it means that you're not going to, if anything you then eat is going to taste odd.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and the only thing I'd say about washing up is that you need to know whether you're somebody who, if you're back in the kitchen, are you actually going to just be, taking more spoonfuls from the pan, or
Mm.
um, going into the fridge. So you just need to know yourself well enough to know, if that works, brilliant. But we're all different, and you just need something that works for you. When I was, when I started using this approach, developing this approach, I mean, I developed it from scratch, just trying to work out how I could help people to lose weight without dieting, without any sort of restrictive dieting pattern. And what I did, because my evening meal was one of those habits that needed changing, was the thing I did was did jigsaws. I did the thing that helped me more than anything stick to what I was doing, was doing jigsaws in the evening. They are, I mean, how simple can it be?
Yeah, because they became addicted, and it's
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
fun. So you just are
yeah,
looking forward for that
yeah,
moment.
yeah. That's right. And something that I think is particularly helpful when you're looking for a distraction like this is, like a jigsaw. It's something that uses your brain, not hugely, but a bit of brain space, and your hands. Those that, because it's the the thing that people sometimes find doesn't really work well enough is sitting watching TV and not doing anything else, because the TV watching is so passive. It leaves our hands free, and it leaves a lot of our brain free. If you think about it, you can daydream easily while you're watching the TV. But what I found was, in the evening, I'd put a TV program on and do the jigsaw, and I was complete. It was really brilliant, because it was absorbing enough and distracting enough. And people do all sorts of things. People that I've worked with do things like, they go and play on a keyboard, they go and surf the internet, they go and text a friend, they go and tidy up, they go and bath their children. It really does not matter,
Hmm.
but to have the plan and to know what you're going to do. And this, we're only talking about this one specific eating behavior here, but having a plan, an actual thought through plan, is enormously helpful when it comes to changing eating habits of any sort, of any particular thing.
That's very, very interesting and powerful. Actually, is a very simple to do it. It's
Yeah,
not actually, it doesn't look like, oh my God, I have to change everything.
yeah, no, exactly. Because changing everything is a bit of a recipe for disaster, frankly, isn't it? It's when you go on a diet where you have to think all the time. It's really, really hard. This is one of the things about where thinking comes in, which is that our brains are only capable of focusing on a very limited amount of information at a time.
Mm.
So there's the name for that brain capacity is called working memory. And working memory is the name that psychologists give to our current mental workspace. So my current mental workspace, my working memory, is now completely full talking to you. I cannot do anything. Well, I can wave my hands around, but I can't. If you gave me anything else to do, I would have to stop talking in order to be able to do the other thing. That's how focused and limited it is. Um, it's a very powerful feature of our uh, mental activity, but it is very limited. So you don't want to be overloading it with a diet that demands that you're thinking about what you eat all the time. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster, a recipe for failure, in my view. I think there's a lot to do with why a lot of diets fail, is that they just overload people's thinking capacity.
So if you're not happy about your relationship with food, dieting is not the answer.
I think for most of us, dieting is not the answer for that well, for two, well, the reasons I think dieting is not the answer for most of us is that it completely ignores evolutionary psychology, as I've just said. It ignores that we've got limited mental workspace. It ignores that our eating habits are really well established and pretty fixed. I mean, they're changeable, but they're pretty entrenched in the unconscious part of our minds. That's one reason they don't work. Another reason they don't work is that most diets take no notice at all of our evolutionary biology. They give you ways of following an eating plan which doesn't relate very much to whether you're hungry, whether you're full. You're encouraged to eat certain foods and avoid certain other foods. All of these things are not necessarily, I mean, a lot of the arguments for particular diets are actually based on evolutionary arguments, but some of them are a bit flaky, frankly. And some of the arguments, I mean, are a bit flaky. And all of those arguments seem to be very contentious. When you think about the food-based ones, like whether it's focused on eating mainly plants or eating mainly animal protein, I don't know the rights and wrongs of that. I'm not qualified to say, but what does strike me is how contentious the arguments are about those. So I don't know. I'll be, but what I do notice is that for some people these approaches do work. So if you find a diet that suits your lifestyle, then great, and doesn't overload you, then that's great, because you'll be able to stick to it. And if you can stick to it, then that's fine. That's the point.
Well, speaking about this, I have to congratulate you about your fascinating new book. That the title is How to Retrain Your Appetite.
Yes.
How to Retrain Your Appetite. And I really love the second line. Lose weight permanently eating all your favorite foods. So it's exactly what you were saying. And I think this is the antithesis of going on a diet.
Yeah.
Because as you said, most of the books, they basically tell you what you shouldn't eat.
Yeah.
And this book, they have a lot of recipe, meal plans, but they change completely your way. They don't allow you to choose the food, basically. They tell you what you have. So it's really restricted. Instead, you provide a completely different approach to weight loss, based on science and psychology. And I just really find it so fascinating. In fact, you have actually one entire chapter inside the book about emotional eating.
Yes.
So can you summarize how psychology can help us understanding why we do this and how we can stop?
Sure. So that is one of the really interesting things, is that because of the way that our evolutionary biology and psychology is interacting with our new food environment, which is, as you've said, it's very recent. What we are now faced with, the environment that we are moving about in, that we're living in, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to our food environment, what our food environment would have been only 200 or 300 years ago, which is nothing, obviously, in evolutionary time. And one of the things that has happened, and I don't know about the history of emotional eating as a discipline, it'd be really interesting to know as and when this started to become more of a problem, but it's certainly something that people struggle with now. I think if we start from the point that we do things again if they are helpful, we are hardwired to keep repeating things that help. And if we experience an unpleasant feeling, an unpleasant emotion, so we're in some sort of unpleasant state, and we eat something and we discover that our feeling changes in a positive way, we will keep doing it. We will do it again. Next time we feel that, we're likely to think, last time that chocolate bar made me feel better, so I'll try it again. That is intelligent learning from experience. It's called instrumental conditioning in psychology. It's that we we do something that either helped us move away from pain before or move towards pleasure. But what can happen is that when we learn that a particular food or eating in general helps to alter an aversive state, what can happen is that we then keep turning to food, maybe for any feeling or any emotion. And what I suggest is a helpful way of thinking about emotional eating is one, it was initially an intelligent solution to a specific issue. And two, the task I think is that we need to understand that emotions are our body's way of telling us what's going on. And we're continually, our bodies and brains are continually monitoring internally and externally to help us know what's going on and help us know how to respond. And our emotions are part of that system. And each emotion, whether we're talking about sadness, whether we're talking about anger, anxiety, guilt, disgust, it doesn't matter. Each of those emotions has its own message. So our emotions are like an ancient wordless language that is built into our body and brain system. And if we've got into a pattern of eating in response to emotional states, the first task is to work out what state it is that you're trying to change, what state it is that is disturbing you and making you reach out for the food, because the different feelings need different responses. So a nice example might be, or a helpful example might be, the difference between eating in response to feeling sad and feeling anxious. Sadness is the emotion that we feel when we've lost something important to us. Anxiety or fear is the emotion that we experience when we're under threat or in danger. So they actually need different types of things. Sadness, in response to loss, what we really need is soothing. Anxiety or fear, what we really need is a sense of safety. Now, they might overlap, but one needs something a bit different from the other. So if it's sadness that you're feeling, it might be that what you need is some rubbish telly, some soothing music, a duvet. You might need your pajamas on. There's soothing things that will actually gently soothe your nervous system instead of the chocolate. The chocolate would do it, but this is an alternative way of directly responding to that sadness. And that's not the only things that will help, but that's the sort of things that are going to help. Maybe contact with other people. Whereas with anxiety or fear, you need to be able to reduce the reaction that your nervous system has had to detecting something dangerous or threatening. So it's a different sort of thing. So then you need to learn to calm that reactivity down. And there's stuff in the book about that. And there's I'm going to be doing actually a series of retreat days in the new year, one of which is going to be a day on emotional eating, where I'll be showing very specific techniques and strategies for helping people to reduce emotional eating.
Fantastic. I saw that, and I was going actually a little bit later on ask it to you, and maybe we can go again on your retreat events. What is actually very interesting that you're speaking about, okay, what about instead of feeling guilty? So when you eat, and then after the end you feel guilty that you had actually a bigger portion, or you didn't took it away, that's what you're supposed to do, or you take a second help,
Yeah, good question. Well, guilt, there are different sorts of guilt. You might eat because you feel guilty about something else, in which case you need to address that. But if the guilt is arising, as you say, from what you've eaten or how you've eaten, I think that actually being able to shift your mindset around eating and start to see food not as something that is bad or naughty, not as something that is even maybe think again about what healthy and unhealthy means, because what may be seen as unhealthy for the body might actually be emotionally quite healthy at times. So being able to have something that is comforting might be a good thing. And I think that what really needs to shift with guilt around eating is actually food, and eating is a really basic way that we connect with other people, we connect with our own bodies, which is a fantastically important thing to be able to do, and we connect with the earth and the planet. And actually eating, if we can rediscover it as a source of joy and celebration and life, and something life-giving rather than something shameful and difficult, and because so many people are conflicted around eating one way or another. It's amazed me since I've been having these conversations with people more since I developed this approach. I don't think I can think of a single person that I've had this conversation with who hasn't said, well, actually, the thing that bothers me is, my constant snacking in the afternoon, or, should I eat breakfast? Or, there's all sorts of stuff that people are confused about. And I'm confused about stuff to do with dietary advice, because I'm not a dietitian. I often find dietary advice quite baffling.
Yeah. And actually, speaking about dietary advice and other, so when even the healthiest person and the more clean eating person has cravings of food that they know, and we know that they are not the best food that you can eat.
Yes.
So how you deal with that? How you deal with the cravings?
Yeah. Well, cravings, I think understanding what happens with cravings is really helpful. One reason that can make cravings more likely is restricting trying to cut out something that you have a lot of experience of enjoying. So some craving might come from missing something that you've had experience before of really enjoying. But whether or not that's why, you can easily crave something that's in your cupboards, in your diet regularly. Like let's take the example of chocolate, because that's the thing that people most commonly describe to me, but not exclusively, but most commonly say they struggle with cravings around. The process with cravings is that there's a, mentally speaking, it's a two-stage process. The first is that the thought of a particular food pops into your mind. That may be because it's a certain time of day and you're used to eating something at that time. It may be because you've just seen an advert on TV. It may be because it could be any reason that food pops into your mind. And if all that happens is the food pops into your mind and then it just sort of flows by, if you don't do anything with it, then you aren't craving. It's not an experience of craving. It's the next step that creates the craving, which is that you start elaborating this idea. So you start, without awareness necessarily, you start thinking about what it would be like to have the chocolate. You might start remembering what it was like last time you had the chocolate. My mouth is now watering even telling you this, right? It's like, because in order to tell you this, I am imagining it. So the more that you embellish and elaborate the initial thought that popped into your mind, the more you rev up your system, the more you are activating your appetite system. You'll be salivating probably. Your gut, your stomach will have started secreting acids and enzymes, perhaps. The whole system is now highly charged with this dopamine-driven drive to go and eat the thing. So that's one way of understanding psychologically what happens with cravings. It's this: you have an idea. If you could let the idea go, you'd be fine. So that's one stage, is to learn how to do that. And the other thing is that the real intensity comes from this internal sort of semi-conscious. It might be slightly conscious, but it might be slightly not entirely conscious elaboration and enhancement of this idea.
Yeah.
And then you're really fighting something that you've created. That's the thing. So you can actually, you can actually address this in a two-stage way, which is the two stages of dealing with the initial thought differently and then responding differently to this elaboration.
Yeah, no, that is really fascinating, because you're absolutely right. We are creating that image,
Yes,
and
yes,
so
yes,
so we
yes,
are basically putting ourselves, we are sabotaging ourselves in a
yes,
way.
that's right. Yes, yes, that's right.
I just really love this second line of your book,
Yeah.
How to Retrain Your Appetite. So this lose weight permanently, eating all your favorite food. This eating all your favorite food is such a fantastic line.
Yes, yes,
And so it looks like you're suggesting to change the habit of when you are eating, not what you are eating. So
yeah.
if you wanted to lose weight, and
Mhm.
you don't need to eliminate certain food and food groups in order to lose the weight permanently.
Mhm.
If you needed to give 3 tips how
Yeah,
to relearn to eat in tune with your body,
yeah, right.
um, what do you
Yeah,
suggest?
yeah. So, good question. First of all, really obvious thing to say, start where you are now, right? So don't throw anything out of your cupboards. Don't go shopping for new stuff. Don't buy new kitchen equipment. Just start with how things are now. Excuse me. Identify which very specific habits are adding to your weight being not what it is. And there's actually a list of the most common habits on my website. You can have a look and just use that as a prompt for the most common habits. But you might have quite idiosyncratic ones of your own, in which case just work out which ones you'd like to change, put them in order of which ones you want to change, and then tackle one at once. And in order to relearn to eat in tune with what your body needs, because what I would suggest is that we gain weight when we eat beyond the point of being full. So we don't really take much notice of whether we're full or not. We finish what's on the plate, or we have dessert because we fancy it, or whatever it is. Or somebody says to us, "Oh, go on, have cake with me. I fancy some cake with my coffee." So there are all sorts of ways in which you might be eating beyond the point of being full. We also commonly nowadays eat when we're not hungry. There's a lot more snacking. There's a lot more different types of eating, not just emotional eating, cravings, but just eating things just because we've seen something on the side, which I call opportunistic eating. And there are other types of eating when we're not hungry. And if we just take more notice, relearn to tune into those signals so that we um, uh, start where we are now, stick with your eating in a way that suits your lifestyle. Don't try and fit your lifestyle around how you think you should eat. Do the opposite. Keep your lifestyle as you need it to be in terms of who you're eating with, whether somebody's cooking for you or whether you're cooking for somebody else, whether you have business lunches, whether you need to fit it around a training program, whatever it is, do it that way round. And then work out what size meals of what composition in terms of the balance of protein and different macronutrients, what size and balance of meal keeps you going till the next one, allowing you to get definitely hungry by the next meal. Because that's what many of us have lost track of, is actually being able to eat to the point of being just full and then being able to stop and then being able to wait until our next meal.
Mm.
And allowing ourselves to get hungry, which is a whole other aspect of this approach, which is really fundamental but really valuable for those of us who've lost track with that.
Yeah, that's very, very fascinating and very interesting because of course, as you said, take away a third of your meal from your plate, and that's good. But it depends how big is the portion.
Of course, yes,
Eh,
yes. And for some people, that won't be an issue anyway. So you certainly wouldn't do that if you already had an evening meal that was just sort of right to keep you going till morning. You wouldn't mess with that. You'd leave it as it is.
Yes, yeah. So basically, it's getting really in tune with your body, and it's more about listen to your body. When you're hungry, eat when you're hungry. Don't eat when you're not,
Yeah.
and eat when. Try to understand when your body is telling I'm full.
Yes.
Would-
And yeah, and doing that in a way that means that your meals are fairly regular. There's a routine to how you eat. Doesn't have to be the same. It might be that you have one weekday type routine and a different weekend routine, but anything that you can do to so although it is eat stop when you're full and wait till you're hungry, it's not a random thing. It's not just at any time of day start eating if you're hungry. It's work out what routine for your eating will fit your lifestyle and keep you going between meals. Have a snack if you need to tide you over between meals. But the reason for the emphasis on routine is that one of the features of people who keep weight off successfully is that they have a regular eating routine. It's not the same as everyone, it doesn't need to be the same as anyone else's. It just needs to be fairly regular so that your body and your mind know when to expect food, know that food is coming, know that you're not going to be getting overly hungry.
So in reality, you're not really changing this the after you took it away one third in a way. You don't change continuously the quantity of food
No,
inside your plate. It's more about understanding when you are really hungry, and that is the moment that you can have your portion. That doesn't mean that that portion it will be for the entire day or will be only for until lunch or until
mm,
dinner, basically.
that's a good point. The Basically, what you're aiming to do is to make things as predictable as you can for your mind and your body, so that what you would do, because what is probably happening if you're not happy with how you're eating at the moment, it's probably the case that you're not happy most days. That again, that the things that are not how you want to be eating are themselves habits. So it's changing the things that habits. As I say, it does not matter if you eat a large bar of chocolate once every 3 months. That's not an issue. That is not an issue. Probably, unless that has some physical effect on you that's bad. It's certainly not a problem in terms of you going to be a problem in terms of your overall weight. If you're doing that several times a week, it will be more of a problem. So it's working out which things matter day in, day out. And then, so the example of the smaller evening meal is that you're working out by having that smaller evening meal, you want to have that smaller evening meal wants to become the new regular size of your evening meal.
Mm.
It may not be the same size as breakfast or lunch if you have both of those, but it's all the process of trial and error and discovering what meal pattern works to get you enjoying food, to be able to um, have gaps between. I mean, our biology as humans is very suited to meals with gaps in between. We're not cows; we don't need to graze all the time, and we're not snakes. We're not designed for massive meals and then very long periods between.
Yeah.
So it's basically it's this trial and error approach to establishing, but only while you're establishing your new pattern. Once your new pattern is clear, it will be fun. It's easy. The beauty of this approach is that because you're focusing on habit changes, when you get to where you want to be, it's easy to
Mm.
stick to. It's hard to change these habits. It's effortful and it takes focus. No more than diets do, but it does take effort and focus. But the difference is that when you get to where you are aiming for, because you have now created a new set of habits and they are automated, it's really easy to stick to. It takes relatively very little effort, focus, or thought.
So it's really interesting because it looks like as soon you are in tune to change the habit, actually changing the habit is not such a difficult thing. But it's to find the motivation ahead
Yeah,
to
yeah,
change the habit, to lose the
yes,
weight, and
yes,
keep this weight off. So
yes.
how you create, which are the good tools to
Mm,
empower your will, the willpower to
yes,
change this, basically to
yeah.
change the habit.
Right. That's a brilliant question. So the things that you've mentioned there, motivation and willpower, are two of the fundamental um, sort of sources of resistance or difficulty that people have. And in terms of if we take motivation first, the drive to actually make the changes and to keep going, the techniques for if I think a lot of your audience may be people who are very familiar with sports performance. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so many of you may be really quite familiar with visualization techniques in terms of motivation to keep going, in terms of training or developing your fitness. The same sorts of approaches are useful here, so that if you want to change how you eat and stick to it, then um, approaches that are based on motivational interviewing, which you might know about, but that have developed that and taken a few steps beyond that to really be able to harness your desire to change and use a lot of visualization are shown to make a real difference to being able to keep on track, because that pattern, if you've been on diets before and you started well and then you've floundered and you've gone back to your old ways, this will be particularly relevant to you. That knowing that might be a problem at the outset, um, targeting your motivation, being clear about why you're aiming to do what you're doing, and tying that in with the habit change is massively helpful. Um, so that's about motivation and willpower. I would say when we think about willpower, I'd suggest that we think about willpower as the thing that you need at the choice point, at the moment where you're going to either do the thing you intended to do or you're not. So you had a plan not to eat biscuits with coffee this morning, and you're standing in well, I was going to say the staff room at work, but actually, probably very few of us are at work at the moment. You're standing in the kitchen, and there's a biscuit tin within reach. So willpower comes in at the point where you've got these options. Do I walk out of the kitchen with the mug of coffee without the biscuits, or do I reach for the biscuits? And if you know, if you appreciate that is like, it's like a bump in the road, a speed bump, that
Yeah.
at the point when you're approaching a speed bump in a car, you have to slightly accelerate to get over the speed bump. You have to put a little bit more energy in, but once you're over it, you're just on your way. And that biscuits with coffee moment is really like that. You just need, particularly helpful to link with your motivation at that point, but it's basically just boosting your energy at that point that will help you to, and there are specific techniques for this. But one thing to mention is that that energy that we use at those choice points, am I going to do the thing I intended to do, or am I going to do the thing I didn't intend to do? That sort of energy, it is a form of energy. And that sort of energy, there are studies suggesting that sort of energy gets depleted over the course of the day and is replenished by sleep. So, in effect, we've got more of it in the morning than we have in the evening. And that is borne out repeatedly with people that I see who struggle most with the habits that are around the evening time, grazing on snacks in the evening. Well, particularly if they drink alcohol, then they find that they're they're a bit disinhibited, that they don't care as much, and so on. So it may be more of an issue later in the day, but it is being able to think about these. I mean, when do you hear about this stuff in a normal diet book? You don't.
Never,
You
never.
you
You're
know not
absolutely
in
right.
not yeah, in terms of actually understanding these things, that we need to harness the drive by connecting with the goals that really matter to us, and then using that natural desire and supercharge it with particular types of visualization. That helps us keep on track. And then the moment by moment decision points are helped by that, but also just being able to understand this is where you need that bit of energy. You're just going to be going over the speed bump of walking out of the kitchen, or walking past that bit of the aisle in the supermarket when you're going to be buying the stuff which will create the problem in the first place, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Just a question about the visualization, because as you said, athletes or anyone that he does a sport and does a competition, even if he does for
Yeah,
fun, there is a lot of visualization there as
yeah,
one of the techniques. But speaking about diets, so
yeah.
and speaking about what you were saying, which kind of image or which kind of
Mm,
visualization you can have, because
yeah,
one thing is the medal,
yes,
you
yes,
kissing the medal when you have
yes,
it,
yes,
but when you're speaking about dieting, can you just explain better?
yes. The visualization is equivalent to the medal, actually. The visualization is focused on where it is that what it is that you're going to most value about getting to where you want to. So what I do in my book is give three very, very simple, very short visualizations for people to try. One is about how they will look, one is about how they will feel in terms of physical movement and fitness, and one is about emotional confidence, confidence in situations. And for some of us, one of those is much for most of us one of those is more important than the others. So for some of us, we're going to look forward more to how we're going to be able to move, or a new activity that we're going to be able to do. For some of us, it's going to be how we're going to look in a particular outfit. For some of us, it's going to be how we feel when we're giving that presentation. So it's connecting with which of those outcomes is going to resonate most with you, that's going to be most important. So the simplest form of this visualization is it's just each one is just like a really simple paragraph, and you can either um, record it for yourself and listen back to it, or you can get somebody to read it out to you, or you can just read it for that matter, and use it to connect with what it is that you're aiming for. There is a much more sophisticated version of this called functional imagery training, which I teach. I teach to fellow professionals, but I also do this. We'll be doing this on one of the retreat days. We'll actually be using this on the motivation retreat day, and it's a much more elaborated and sophisticated version of visualization that goes way beyond that to very specific uh, future time where you can imagine achieving the goal you want to. So it's very like getting the medal, but it might be something like um, standing up and giving a presentation to a bunch of colleagues. It might be being at your friend's wedding in the outfit that you're going to feel really, really good in. It's very specific, and it's very much based on what is going to give you that real buzz of satisfaction.
Amazing, really amazing. I have to say, I'm so connected now with you. I think it's a very, you're giving amazing, really amazing tools, because changing the habits is so tough. But
Yeah,
what you're doing, approaching diet in a completely different way. So
yeah,
it's not about denying yourself the food you love,
no,
but is to control your appetite basically,
yeah,
and to
yeah,
learn to eat only when you are hungry.
yeah.
So I would imagine this is a book that you need to keep it close to you and read many times,
Mhm.
because it's something that you have to digest. If I
Yes,
can
I
do
think
that to
that's
connection,
right. I think
you have
that's
to
right because there's
digest until it became a really a natural habit basically.
yes, yes, and I
um yep.
sorry.
No, no, you go, sorry.
The reason I called it "How to Retrain Your Appetite" is simply that we all did this when we were babies. We all ate in tune with our hunger and fullness signals when we were infants. And if you there's I've got a on my YouTube channel, I've got a lovely video of a 1 year old little girl eating, and she shows this beautifully. We just went round to her home, and we shot her mother feeding her at one meal. There was no, we didn't cut out, well, we cut down the actual video just to be watchable, but just turning up for one meal just enabled us to film exactly how 1 year old kids tend to eat. And
Mm.
that's how we all did. But what's happened as we've grown up is that for all sorts of reasons, we we start eating beyond the point of being full, whether that's to be polite and eat what's on our plate, or whether that's because we're worried about wasting food, which is another issue, um, an important issue. But I think that my line on food waste is that people have people have tended to think that if you leave stuff on your plate, you're wasting food. If you eat what's on your plate, you're not wasting food. My line on it is, if you eat what you need for your what you need to keep you going for the next meal, and there is still food on your plate, anything that you do with that is wasted. It's wasted if it goes in the recycling bin. It's wasted if it goes through your body into the toilet.
Mm.
But the difference is that, because you didn't need it, the difference is if it goes through your body, it will deposit fat along the way. It will have metabolic effects. It will have effects on your body in a way that putting it in the recycling won't. And when we keep eating things because we think we should, we are wasting it,
Mm.
and we're causing other problems. And it's only when we really retrain our eye to the amount of food that our bodies need, which, frankly, as a middle aged woman with a completely sedentary job, my meals are, I have to say, I was shocked at how little I need to eat to keep going. I mean, and to begin with, I found it really unsettling. But what I found is that, and this has been borne out by loads of people that I've worked with, what I found was that when I actually ate what my body needed, the food that I do eat tastes fabulous. If you aren't hungry when you start eating, you are cheating yourself. I've discovered, and I was doing that for decades. You what you are missing out on is the absolute fabulousness of what food tastes like. Normal, real food tastes so amazing when you're hungry.
Yeah. That's very true. Very
Mm,
true. I did the
mm.
fasting, and I have to say, when my longest fasting was 7 days, but I did it for a different purpose. It was not
Yeah,
to lose weight.
yeah.
And I have to say, the first time I I ate a pear, I still remember that flavor.
Yes,
It was
yes,
so.
yes.
It's like, oh my
Fantastic.
God, this is the best thing I ever had in
Yeah,
my life.
yeah.
So
And it is an amazing discovery. It's a
yeah.
fantastic discovery. And it's the thing, because I think that it's no accident that the approach that I developed is what it is, because I really, really love nice food. I've got an extremely sweet tooth. Um, I love eating with friends. That's my favourite thing to do, is to eat with family and friends, and it's a sort of um, that's why I didn't get rid of any, that's why right from the word go, I knew that this was only going to be doable if it could include all those amazing things. But the really, really staggering thing for me was exactly what you said about the pear, was the discovery of what broccoli tastes like and what spinach tastes like, completely, steamed broccoli or steamed spinach with lemon juice and salt and pepper blew me away.
Amazing. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so what keeps me on this track is that I enjoy eating more than ever. I still eat chocolate. I still eat, I still eat anything. I still drink wine, but it's the the thing that has made it easier for me to stop eating at this mealtime with this what people sometimes, well, often when I until people got used to it, they would say, "Is that all you're having?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, I'm just trying." I had played it down for a while, but what I now know is that if I make sure that what I eat at this meal is just the right amount, the next meal is going to taste amazing, whatever it is.
Yeah. So do you always have the same like breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or do you are so in tune with your body that actually you don't have a specific time of the day
No,
that you are
I,
eating?
no, I think it's really important to do the regular meals. But so for me, that's 3 meals a day. But for most people I work with, it's 3 meals a day. But for quite a number of people, it's 2 meals a day. Um, a few people have tried more often, very small amounts, which might suit some people. But I think the population of people that come and work with me individually tend to be people who um, the smaller number of meals suits them better, either 2 or 3. Um, and sometimes they need snacks. Sometimes for a lot of people, they don't want to give up their evening snacking completely. So what we do is work out what fantastic evening snack they would really enjoy, when to have that as a regular feature, and what to do to their evening meal to make sure that that allows them to get hungry by the time they're snack. So it's I think I am extremely in tune with, and this is what I encourage people to be, really discover what it feels like to eat in tune with these signals. But these signals will be pretty predictable if you have a routine. Once you establish this routine, you just need to then tweak it. So if you find that you're getting, if you want to have, if your lunchtime, let's say, is about 1 o'clock, and you're finding that by 12 you're getting, you're definitely hungry by then you could either have a small, very easily digestible snack, maybe a few cherry tomatoes or something, or you could alter the size or the composition of your breakfast.
Mm.
You see what I mean? And it might sound very, in a way, it might sound a bit complicated, but it's when you look at it as an individual, it's not. It's just right. And all of this stuff is freely available on the website. Things like uh, being able to look at there's a scale that I developed to help people to tune into their hunger and fullness signals, which I called the Appetite Pendulum. That's on the website, freely downloadable.
And
And you
on
can,
your book
yeah, and
also.
in the book,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And I have to say, thanks to create also this retreat that it looks like that from January,
yeah,
February, March. You have so many dates, and that is
yeah.
beautiful. So we will add on the show notes
Great.
definitely also the link for your events. They
Yeah,
look really, really interesting and giving you amazing tools to find finally the way how to lose weight, keep the weight how you want it,
yes,
change the
yes,
habits. I can see strengthening your willpower.
yeah,
So it's amazing.
yeah. Thank you, Erica.
No, thanks to you. Thanks to share with us all these very, very useful tools that
Mm.
are actually you make it easy, you make it
Yeah,
simple, you make it
yeah,
understanding, you're not taking away what we love, that is
No.
specific maybe foods that you find really difficult to detach,
Mm.
but changing just with the portion and stuff. I think it's a brilliant
Mm.
way. So thanks so much, and
Thank
thanks so
you.
much to be a fantastic guest.
No, it's lovely.
And
Pleasure. It's a pleasure. I love talking about this stuff.
in the show notes, you will find how to connect with Dr. Ellen McCarthy. I would love to know also your thoughts. So please reach us out by comments or just look at the show notes, and there are all the details how you can get in contact direct with us. But before I leave, don't forget to visit 33fuel.com, where you can find the best healthy and powerful sport nutrition on the planet, where real food is first. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.